Welcome to the Virtual Strategic Solutions Virtual Reality Simulation System. Accessing Legacy Dataset. Files loaded. Simulation ready. Tenpenny Tower is a fortified settlement in the Capital Wasteland. It is located out in the wastes west of the DC ruins, directly southwest of the Robco main production facility. Before the Great War, in 2077, the tower was a resort. The Ghoul, Michael Masters, who was once an eminent scientist 200 years prior, vacationed at the tower and noted that it was a resort for the wealthy and powerful. Michael Masters also claims that the hotel was built on the foundations of a plantation. By 2277, Tenpenny Tower had become a private and elitist residential and commercial building owned by Alistair Tenpenny, an entrepreneur from England who only permits the well-to-do or wealthy to reside there. Tenpenny tells the lone wanderer that as soon as he saw the tower on the horizon, he knew it would suit his purposes. He describes hiring individuals who fixed the building up quickly and began to provide its security. Those under his employ include Chief Gustavo and right-hand man Mr. Burke. The water in the tower was not irradiated, and the group was able to begin siphoning electricity from the still-working underground DC metro system. Soon, word had spread among the wastes and many flocked to this new settlement, but Tenpenny would only let in traders, or those with enough caps, and certainly no ghouls. Soon, shops, a bar, and a clinic were set up in and around the lobby. The penthouse suites were given to those of Tenpenny's choosing, where they could watch him take pot shots with his sniper rifle as part of his wasteland safari. Gustavo took over security detail for the tower and concerned himself with the Ghoul problem, while Mr. Burke set out to find a way to end the eyesore on the horizon, which distressed Tenpenny. A Protectron, Shakes, was programmed to be the tower's barman. The structure itself is surrounded by tall concrete walls, which create a compound of sorts. Around the rear of the building is the entrance to the generator room, which is used in the Quest Tenpenny Tower. There is also a covered area to the right of the main gate, which serves as the guards' quarters. The building did not completely escape damage from the bombs and was repaired with sheets of metal in the areas of the hotel that took the most damage. Entering the building, the lone wanderer will find themselves in the lobby, which contains stairs to the third-floor apartments, an elevator to the penthouse, and is home to a variety of businesses. Alistair Tenpenny is the founder and owner of Tenpenny Tower, originally born around 2197 in the post-nuclear wastelands of former Great Britain. Tenpenny crossed the ocean to seek his fortune in the Capital Wasteland. He does not like talking about himself or his past, preferring his achievements to speak for themselves. As such, little is known about him before the founding of Tenpenny Tower. What is known is that with his fake aristocratic accent, he managed to amass a significant wealth. This fortune was large enough that by 2257, he was hiring entire mercenary crews to recover high-value equipment. One such expedition was an attempt to recover power armor from Fort Constantine. It failed, with nearly half of the team wiped out, and a Mr. Crowley left bitter and vengeful over being left behind. Tenpenny paid little attention to the mercs, and even less to Crowley, on account of him being a ghoul. Shortly after this botched job, Tenpenny met a man who changed his life, Mr. Burke. Burke made the restoration of the future Tenpenny Tower, then just a husk of a derelict resort, jutting up from the horizon in southwestern Capital Wasteland, a plausible endeavor, establishing himself as Tenpenny's right-hand man, capable of doing what needs to get done. A lot of work went into restoring the tower to a fraction of its former glory, and then securing the right kind of tenants to enjoy its security and luxuries. The end result is one of the only places in the Capital Wasteland where residents can enjoy a quality of life approximating pre-war conditions, thanks to Tenpenny's wealth and Burke's skills. It is also protected by a crack mercenary team that is always paid on time, a rarity in the wastes. Less rare is the fact that Alistair used to own slaves at Tenpenny Tower. May Wong is one of his victims, who managed to free herself and flee to Rivet City. While Tenpenny believes the tower to be the beginning of something great, rather than his crowning achievement, he has allowed himself to rest on his laurels and largely retired to his penthouse suite. He is happy to extract rent from those living inside its walls. Since Tenpenny Tower is a most desirable location after all the renovations, he has no trouble amassing enough caps to pay caravans to ship supplies or foot the bill for his substantial security force. He rarely ever leaves his chambers, sometimes not even bothering to dress and leading a generally decadent lifestyle. Dr. Julius Banfield had to treat him once for bed sores, likely caught from Susan Lancaster, his mistress, and the Tower's prostitute. The two openly flirt whenever they happen to be in proximity. He greets each evening with her with glee. Beyond sex and wanton violence, the octogenarian also carefully nurtures his alcoholism, boasting that he has not been dry in years, and maintains a habit of eating an iguana bit sandwich with no salt and a peeled pear on the side for lunch, day after day, with zero tolerance for change. Margaret Primrose is frustrated at such waste of her culinary talents, but remains at her landlord's mercy. Whenever he bothers showing up downstairs to eat at the table reserved specifically for him, she shows deference and tries to suggest alternate meals, but Tenpenny remains loyal to his sandwich and viciously points out any shortcomings, such as adding salt. In fact, by 2277, it is Mr. Burke who is in real control at Tenpenny Tower, with the eccentric Alistair a shut-in figurehead, attracting attention with his antics, suffering from madness reserved for the obscenely rich. Burke is agreeable and proactive, and has taken over so many aspects of the Tower's functioning that Tenpenny barely needs to think about things anymore, as Burke is always there to take care of everything, anticipating his needs. Tenpenny does not know how he got along without him. One such instance of Burke's proactiveness is him seizing the chance to wipe Megaton out and pin the blame on Tenpenny, by reacting to Alistair's comment about it being a bit of an eyesore. Alcoholic and likely senile, Tenpenny was easy to convince that Megaton must be sacrificed. As the bomb was unstable regardless and could explode at any time, Burke would tell people to vacate, and it was all just natural selection in the end. Burke spent weeks putting the plan in motion, careful not to arouse suspicion or give the denizens of Megaton any reason to flee. The destruction of Megaton, one of the only significant trading outposts on the left bank of the Potomac, would help the unfolding of Tenpenny's master plan, which includes using Tenpenny Tower as a staging area to remedy the blight that plagues the Capital Wasteland. Clearing out the past to make room for the future is part of that plan, which is supposed to bring upon a pure and stainless future, which does not necessarily include ghouls. In fact, should Tenpenny's project come to fruition, ghouls and other aberrations of nature would become a thing of the past, but that glorious future requires seeing the Tower as a crucible for it, and any sacrifices as necessary to achieve it. While Burke passes this off as Tenpenny's sole vision, portraying the aged and demented Alistair as a Pam of passion, ideals, and an antithesis of the apathetic, blighted men inhabiting the Capital Wasteland, it is not clear how much of that plan is actually Tenpenny's own invention. One huge difference between what Burke says and what Alistair actually thinks is the issue of ghouls. While Tenpenny generally refers to them with a certain degree of contempt, when reminded of Crowley, he notes that those zombies are hard to kill. He does not actually hate them. Once he deals with the shock of someone proposing ghouls moving into the Tower, he turns out to be largely indifferent. If the residents of the Tower are fine with ghoul residents, he will happily permit them to settle over Chief Gustavo's objections. In fact, he will even relish the opportunity to hunt them down, should they misbehave. Ultimately, what matters is that they follow the rules and pay the rent on time. It does not even matter if they displace existing residents. Caps are caps in the end. Edgar Wellington spends most of his time in his suite with his wife, Millicent, who he despises, but like her, he only leaves to eat a couple of times a day. He sleeps with her in their bed a few hours every night and sneaks out to sleep with Susan Lancaster on Mondays. He is very proud of his luxurious lifestyle at Tenpenny Tower and believes himself to be above the common wastelander. Like most of the residents of Tenpenny Tower, he is a ghoul hater due to Roy Phillips's persistent efforts to get inside. Millicent is one of the few souls who live in security in the Capital Wasteland, behind the stone walls of Tenpenny Tower. She lives in the tower with her husband, Edgar, and like her husband, comes off as rude and snobbish. She's the tower's resident gossip, and is infamous among its inhabitants for her busybody nature, to the point where her husband can be heard calling her a social hermit for her inability to form friendships with the female residents of the tower. She rejects being asked to socialize with them, chalking up her meager social circle as being a product of their jealousy towards her, rather than acknowledge the role her gossiping has had in influencing her relationships with her fellow residents. As a result, Millicent spends most of her day vying for her husband's attention and can frequently be overheard insisting he listened to her and insulting him for his lack of response. Gustavo was born in 2235. Prior to becoming security chief of Tenpenny Tower, Gustavo worked his way up to become leader of a mercenary band of professional fighters. Mr. Burke was rescued by Gustavo and quickly hired him and his men to form the security force at the tower. His personality is gruff, but also good-natured in a "don't give me grief, I'm just doing my job, ma'am" sort of manner. However, he soon becomes a loud, no-nonsense hard-ass when his team or his charges are in immediate danger. He is particularly hostile to ghouls. "The only good ghoul is a dead ghoul," is a fond saying of his, particularly if ghouls are nearby. He expressed that it's only a matter of time before they go zombie, and people shouldn't take the risk. He even goes as far to say that you would be doing them a favor by putting a bullet between their eyes. In charge of the protection of Alistair Tenpenny, as well as the other residents, Gustavo is naturally concerned with the intentions of Roy Phillips and his gang, and speculates that he is planning to rush Tenpenny Tower with hordes of feral ghouls. While Tenpenny is a massive bigot and doesn't care how big their pile of bottle caps is, Gustavo might not even care about the ghouls, but they are really starting to get on his nerve with their amount of pleading. Considering his past and his quick temper, he is not someone to rile up. Irving, a wealthy elderly man with a secret identity, believes himself to be the direct descendant of Chairman Chung, the leader of the People's Republic of China before the war. Prideful of his assumed lineage, he insists on addressing himself and all others as comrade, and is embarrassed by his own given name as it fails to reflect his imagined heritage. The physician for Tenpenny Tower, Banfield runs the wellness clinic and is responsible for the health of the tower's residents. He achieves this primarily by providing them with various prescription drugs and his own concoctions based on pre-war medicines. While Banfield is not terribly fond of the tower's landlord, he is wary of crossing him. It's not terribly difficult, as Tenpenny rarely comes down, and Banfield only had to treat him once for bed sores. It's not clear where Banfield comes from, but he does make mention of some of his scientific colleagues publishing papers. Much of Banfield's knowledge of ghouls, for example, comes from papers published by his colleagues, although he never actually verified their findings and, unsurprisingly, has never been published. As a result, he has developed a theory that the ghoul condition is inevitably degenerative and will always lead them to a feral state, with nothing to cure them or alleviate the symptoms. He's sympathetic to their plight, which, together with his scientific rigor, makes him potentially ready to abandon his prejudices and give Roy Phillips and his ghouls a chance. In fact, it might provide him with a chance to perform an independent study of ghoul physiology and publish his findings. It would also help him verify whether the radiation-damaged immune systems make them vectors of disease or not. Of course, his lack of interaction with real ghouls makes it easy to maintain his prejudices, brushing them off as mere caution. Regardless of his views on ghouls, Banfield is a competent, if conservative, doctor. He refuses to perform surgeries unless absolutely necessary, believing that if the risk of infection outweighs the benefits, there's no reason to open up a patient. Cosmetic surgery tops his list of frivolous procedures. It's dangerous, requires specialized equipment, and is prone to infection. He considers surgeons who perform it to be foolish, risking infection and death just to alter someone's looks. It's possible that it stems from his lack of access to specialized tools. He envies Horace Pinkerton's access to high-end tools that enable him to carry out these delicate procedures reliably. As the sole doctor in Tenpenny Tower, Banfield has a complex web of relationships with most of its residents, although not with Tenpenny as mentioned above. Anthony Ling, the tower's fashion expert, consistently tries to convince Banfield for a makeover. The doctor consistently refuses, believing that lab coats never go out of style. In fact, Ling tends to grate a bit with his insistence, and Banfield will eventually just humour him to get rid of him. There's an element of mutuality. Banfield regularly suggests that Ling schedule a medical checkup, but since Anthony hates the feeling of metal on his skin, he only visits when he absolutely must. He's on good terms with Security Chief Gustavo, maintaining a professional, if gruff, relationship. The sticking point is the health of the security staff, as Banfield noted an increase in accidents in recent times. Gustavo routinely dismisses Banfield's concerns that someone might get eventually hurt if horseplay continues, believing that his men need to blow off steam due to the recent tensions. Banfield doesn't like it, but has no real power to force change. The situation is different with Margaret Primrose and other women. The two are good friends, engaging frequently in playful banter. Banfield believes Margaret works too hard and routinely threatens to prescribe her a vacation, making her aghast. Margaret loves cooking and taps Banfield for advice. He appreciates her efforts to add healthy alternatives to the menu, though he's aware convincing the residents is difficult. He's less appreciative of some of her culinary experiments. Margaret once found a sushi cookbook and promptly tried to recreate it using raw Meyerlurk meat. The risk of the meat being bad meant Banfield had to go through her customers to ensure it had no adverse effects. With Lydia Montenegro, his relationship is friendly and more professional. She's his primary supplier of holodisks and other supplies, somewhat annoyed that Banfield treats her as a merchant, rather than purveyor of a high-class boutique. Banfield, in turn, is annoyed by the fact that while she takes the tranquilizer medicine he prescribes her to help her relax, she routinely exceeds the dosage and mixes them with alcohol. She also tries to get him to perform cosmetic surgery on her to make her look young again. Banfield always refuses, believing that there's no point to such frivolous surgery, considering the risks of infection and complications. On the other end is Tiffany Cheng. The wife of Irving Cheng doesn't make frivolous requests, instead suffering from high levels of stress due to her husband's inattentiveness and preoccupation with communism. Banfield would like her to relax and stop daydreaming about violence directed at her spouse, and the regular half-serious inquiries about killing him are making him question her mental health. He does find the blackly humorous situation somewhat amusing, leveraging her hate towards more productive ends, taking sedatives to help her deal with the situation. Finally, there's Susan Lancaster. Banfield is one of her primary lovers, and the two frequently indulge in a role-play fetish, playing doctor and nurse. Entire Tuesdays and Thursdays are set aside for examinations in Lancaster's penthouse, during what they both jokingly refer to as a house call. They openly flirt with each other, with virtually every exchange containing some sort of double entendre. After years of adventuring, Herbert Dashwood amassed a large enough fortune to buy his way into Tenpenny Tower for a comfortable retirement. Herbert Dashwood is friendly, down to earth, and possesses a self-ingratiating sense of humour. If asked, he'll gladly talk about the things he's done, places he's been, and creatures he's encountered. He occasionally sneaks into the rooms of other people as a way of keeping himself amused, and keeping his adventuring skills honed in case he ever needs to come out of retirement. Both his and Argyle's legacy lives on, preserved by Dashwood in the Galaxy News radio play The Adventures of Herbert Daring Dashwood, and his ghoul manservant Argyle. Produced by Three Dog a few years prior to 2277, it was created in the style of the radio plays from before the Great War. Unlike the pre-war plays, these stories are all true according to Dashwood. They are often played and became a favourite program across the Capital Wasteland. The proprietor of Tenpenny Tower's finest and only clothing store, Anthony Ling, carries a selection of pre-war apparel, salvaged throughout the years. Ling advertises his business to visitors of the tower, suggesting that they upgrade to fabulous at the new urban apparel. He firmly believes that every resident of Tenpenny Tower deserves to live in luxury due to their smarts, beauty, and/or wealth. To him, it is simply survival of the fittest, and he is one of the winners. As such, he is firmly opposed to letting Roy Phillips and his ghouls inside the tower. He considers them to be less than human, labeling them as monsters who devour their own children, and refuses to even consider living alongside them. As a whole, he fits in with the snobbish, privileged residents of the tower. Ling suggests retail therapy as a means of solving their problems, telling Margaret Primrose to purchase new clothes rather than mope, and that is to someone he considers a friend, and advising Tiffany Chung that buying a new dress is better than any old pill Doc Banfield prescribes. Perhaps the most interesting relationship he has is with Lydia Montenegro. The two proprietors trade barbs, which might very well be mistaken for genuine hatred, the least of which is Ling calling Montenegro's boutique an antique shop, to which she replies by calling his threads atrocious and needing new material. However, Ling's repartees and melodramatic responses show it is just ribbing. Their exchanges can get vicious or even grotesque, as Ling is prone to inventing new phrases such as fabulosity, which Lydia does not waste any time pointing out, or taking a jab at his stereotypical effeminate behavior or body features such as a pear-shaped derriere. Ling is prone to flirting with the security detail at Tenpenny Tower, making a variety of more or less subtle passes. None of them reciprocate his advances, which does not stop him from making suggestive remarks all the way up to Chief Gustavo. Gustavo also has none of it, and Ling's persistence frustrated the chief to the point that he routinely warns Anthony that his rifle is loaded, the safety is off, and he would hate to have it accidentally go off in Ling's direction. Despite his flamboyance and flirting, some residents remain oblivious of his homosexuality. Irving Cheng, who seeks Ling's advice on making himself more attractive to his wife, is unaware of Ling's total lack of attraction towards women. Another person unaware of his orientation is, surprisingly, Millicent Wellington, the tower's resident busybody. Despite cataloguing each resident's whereabouts, Wellington believes that Ling should simply find a nice woman and settle down. Lydia Montenegro runs the boutique Le Chic, which serves as the general store. She speaks as though she's running a high-end shop and not peddling salvage to wasteland dwellers. Such is the elitist illusion she lives under. Lydia spends her days in the shop, then relaxes at the Federalist Lounge with her friend Michael Hawthorne. Michael Hawthorne is one of Tenpenny Tower's residents and a primary visitor to its Federalist Lounge. His drinking habits have taken over his life and his life savings, to the point where he may as well have a reserved seat at the lounge due to how frequent his visits are. Although little is known about Michael's background, during his conversations with Herbert Dashwood, he jokes that he has been drinking since he was a toddler. When Dashwood warns him to be careful with his remaining brain cells, he replies, "Nah, drown the buggers," and shows little concern for his own well-being. Despite his constant drunken stupor, he has formed friendships with some of the other residents. Margaret owns and operates the Café Beau Monde. Because the cafe only serves the residents of Tenpenny Tower, her clientele is limited, allowing Margaret to prepare and serve all the meals. The restaurant is open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Margaret is the service provider the entire time. When the restaurant closes, she generally spends her time in her room. Margaret Primrose says she picked up cooking from her late mother. She explains that her mother wasn't always the best, though she showed her love for her family through cooking. Since Alistair Tenpenny refuses to come down from his suite, Margaret has to prepare all his meals and take them up to him herself. For some time, Susan Lancaster was a member of the Paradise Falls Slavers. For reasons unknown, she left the organization on bad terms, slitting the throat of one of their members before her departure. By 2277, she had gained residence at Tenpenny Tower, where she made a living as a high-class prostitute, or escort, as the tower's residents prefer. Susan regularly services many of the tower's male residents, including Dr. Banfield, Herbert Dashwood, and Alistair Tenpenny himself. When not with her customers, she spends her free time shopping or drinking at the Federalist Lounge, taking her meals at the Café Beau Monde. Roy Phillips is a pre-war ghoul that is the leader of a group of fellow ghoul dissidents living inside the Warrington Metro Station tunnels. They have decided to try to force Mr. Alistair Tenpenny into letting them move into his tower after their attempts to peacefully pay to be let in were met with bigotry and threats. As an ex-cop with a no-nonsense black-and-white worldview that has carried over into his new life as a ghoul, he has come to terms with his ghoulhood and yet demands that humans treat ghouls with respect. He has no patience for bigots. Bessie Lynn is his ghoul friend. Bessie Lynn is a timid and nervous woman who consistently defers to her boyfriend Roy Phillips in all matters, stemming from her self-consciousness at having become a ghoul. Although she has accepted her new physical state, she mentions how she once was pretty and adored by many, and how her ghoulification has put an end to such things. If she is allowed into Tenpenny Tower, she appears to be unaware of what Roy Phillips did to the previous inhabitants, and subsequently the Lone Wanderer may inform her of their fates. If the Lone Wanderer has not yet completed the Tenpenny Tower quest, Bessie can be found in the living quarters of Warrington Station. Prior to the bombs dropping, Michael was a renowned and highly intelligent electronic and biological engineer who had a focus in human mutation experiments. After being inspired by the works of German, Russian, and Chinese doctors, he began breeding super warriors in an attempt to keep America at the forefront of such scientific advancements. He acknowledges that individuals were hurt as a result of the experimentation, but also points out progress was being made. Despite remarking how the experiments were yielding great results, he views his ghoulification as a karmic curse for them and remains bitter at his transformation, albeit appreciates the added longevity. He also mentions that he used to vacation in Tenpenny Tower prior to the war and finds irony in now having to fight his way in. The ghouls want to live in the luxurious Tenpenny Tower, but neither Alistair Tenpenny nor the other residents are willing to let them in. The player character can choose to kill the band of ghouls, let them into the tower, or find an uneasy diplomatic solution.